Good morning, and thank you for joining Durham County Veteran Services as we present the Memorial Day Morning of Remembrance. Please stand if you're able for our national anthem and remain standing for our Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated. We will now have our opening and our welcome by Jonathan Crooms.
Good morning and welcome to Durham County Veteran Services 2020 Memorial Day program. My name is Jonathan Crooms, and co-leading with me this morning is my colleague and fellow Veteran Services Officer, Lindsay Atkins. Our office helps the county's nearly 15,000 veterans, their dependents, and their survivors with accessing VA, state, and local benefits. Whether you are watching on Facebook or the Durham Television Network, we are happy to be observing this holiday with you. We traditionally host this program each Memorial Day on the steps of Durham County's Administration 1 building near the county's war monuments. But the COVID pandemic has made it necessary to change the format of this year's observance. Regardless of the challenging circumstances of the present, Durham County Veteran Services wants to ensure that the community has the opportunity to honor the 372 known names of Durham County's war dead. This morning, we will honor these Marines, sailors, soldiers, and airmen and women with a roll call. But first, Lindsay will share with us the purpose of Memorial Day.
Yes. And on behalf of our Board of County Commissioners, our County Manager, Wendell Davis, and the Veteran Services Director, Lois Harvin Raven, we greet you this morning and on behalf also of our grateful nation. I just want to share a little bit about the history of Memorial Day. Memorial Day is an American holiday observed on the last Monday of May, honoring the men and women who died while serving in the United States military. Memorial Day 2020 is today, Monday, May 25th. Originally known as Decoration Day, it originated in the years following the Civil War and became an official federal holiday in 1971. The early observances of Memorial Day, the Civil War, which ended in the spring of 1865, claimed more lives than any conflict in U.S. history and required the establishment of the country's first national cemeteries. By the late 1860s, Americans in various towns and cities had begun holding springtime tributes to these countless fallen soldiers, decorating their graves with flowers and reciting prayers. It is unclear where exactly this tradition originated. Numerous different communities may have independently initiated the memorial gatherings. And some records show that one of the earliest Memorial Day commemoration was organized by a group of freed slaves in Charleston, South Carolina, less than a month after the Confederacy surrendered in 1865. Nevertheless, in 1966, the federal government declared Waterloo, New York, the official birthplace on Memorial Day. Waterloo, which first celebrated the day on May 5th, 1866, was chosen because it hosted an annual community-wide event during which businesses closed and residents decorated the graves of soldiers with flowers and flags. Memorial Day tradition. Cities and towns across the United States host Memorial Day parades each year, often incorporating military personnel and members of veterans organizations. Some of the largest parades take place in Chicago, New York, and Washington, D.C. Americans also observe Memorial Day by visiting cemeteries and memorials. Some people wear a red poppy in remembrance of those fallen in war, a tradition that began with a World War I poem entitled "In Flanders Fields" by John McCrae. Finally, and did you know, each year on Memorial Day, a national moment of remembrance takes place at 3 p.m. local time. The National Moment of Remembrance is an annual event that asks Americans, wherever they are, at 3 p.m. local time on Memorial Day, to pause for a duration of 1 minute to remember those who have died in military service to the United States. At this time, we will begin our roll call, which will be led by Jonathan Crooms.
Our roll call begins with World War I, which lasted from April 6, 1917 through November 11, 1918. Of the 4.7 million Americans who served, 116,516 were killed, while 204,002 were wounded. There are 62 casualties from Durham County. Junie Andrews, Junius C. Ashworth, Willie Bird, Carl Blake, Albert B. Brafford, Hugh Clark, Willard L. Clark, Norman Cole, James J. Cruz, James R. Cullum,
Hort Denny, Arthur L. Ewing, Willie Ewings, John M. Fawcett, C.C. Farrell, John W. Fowler, Roy H. Fuller, Sidney Haycock, George O. Hamlet, James Heasey,
Wade H. Height, Lynn G. Holcomb, Oliver Howe, Clarence O. Hundley, Walter H. Inscore, Marion S. Johnson, Bernard C. Keith, Fred Kerr, Bernard C. Knorr, Harold W. Knorr,
John E. Lynch, James Mabry, Jacob A. Marshburn, Marvin B. Martin, Ernest Maynard, Hugh McFarland, Duck McLean, R. L. Mitchell, James T. Mooney, Leonard N. Moore,
Leonard W. Moore, Charlie Moss, Carl Lee Neal, Bonnie Purrier, Claude M. Rawlings, Ike J. Rigsby, Henry Roberson, William Shepard, Willie H. Sims, Gurney Smith,
Vernon Smith, D. L. M. Spencer, Royal W. Tilley, Elijah Triplett, Dewey S. Thompson, P. C. Venable, Julian Walker, D. Weaver, Charles V. Wilkins, Ernest V. W. Williams, Joseph Williamson, Charles Wood.
World War II lasted from December 7, 1941 through December 31st, 1946. Of the 16,112,566 Americans who served, 405,399 were killed, while 670,846 were wounded. There are 244 casualties from Durham County. Isaac Newton Alexander, Walter P. Anderson, James T. Andrews, Zalph H. Andrews, Watt Howard Averitt, Charlton Bagley, Clayporn H. Baker, Gilbert S. Baker.
Edward Thomas Barefoot, James M. Barnett, Clifton T. Balcom, Nilo B. Beasley, Willie Belvin, Ernest Pry Black, William L. Blanton Jr., Sidney A. Bobbitt Jr., David P. Bond, Jesse Wilson Boone.
C.W. Brewer, Joseph A. Broccolier, John S. Bromage, Daniel M. Bullock, Wallace M. Bullock, Herman J. Bumpus, Owen C. Bumpus, Archie M. Cameron, Kenneth W. Cameron, Marvin Lee Carlton,
Vernon W. Carlton, Raymond Hunter Carpenter, Moses S. Cash, Anthony W. Cates, Paul P. Caudill, John F. Chappelle Jr., William Alfred Clark, Trella D. Collins Jr., Henry Thomas Compton, Claude W. Cook.
C.C. Council Jr., Frank Crawley, James T. Doherty, Henry D. Deaton, Henry E. Deaton, Eugene L. Dellinger, Benjamin Ross Dodson Jr., Betty Walker Driscoll, Robert G. Dunn Jr., Orvis Edmondson,
Fred A. Edwards, James Talmadge Edwards, Josephus S. Edwards Jr., Arnold Ellis, Homer E. Eubanks, Roy H. Ferguson, A. D. Farrell, A. Clyde Farrell, William J. Farrell, Louis P. Ficken,
David Kerr Fleming Jr., Thurston D. Fogelman, Joseph Marshall Fox, Lad Bronson Fugua, Baxter Wayne Garrett, Wildred O. Gates, Arthur Ray Giddings, Waitman C. Gibbon Jr., Earl A. Glenn, John Wesley Goodwin,
John H. Graham, Jesse G. Griffin, Darrell W. Hamilton, Wallace Watkins Hamlet, David J. Harden, Charles B. Hopper Jr., Arthur M. Harris Jr., Harvey J. Harris, John H. Harris, Theodore M. Harris,
Edward C. Hatcher, Bernard Hetty, Edward A. Hendricks, Vernon Hewitt, George Stewart Hicks, Donald Wilton Hill, Harold L. Hill, Wilfred D. Hobby, James Lester Hobby, Robert Maynard Hobgood,
David Robert Hughes, Tom F. Hughes, Robert Judson Hunt, Ralph N. Hunter, Howard O. Insko Jr., Audrey Stansel Jackson, Leon Jacobs, Henry E. James, Merrill W. Johnson, Paul S. Johnson,
Thomas O. Jones, Warren Clifton Jones, Jake I. Jordan, Joe Bernard Julian, Merle A. Kellerman, Robert B. Kellerman, James R. Kenyon, Alvin L. Kepley, Grady P. King, Samuel S. Kenton.
Lord J. Clean, George H. Ladd, Leon Langley, Henry J. Latta, William V. Lawson, Paul LeGrand, Roosevelt Little, Grady W. Lord, Edgar Lugie Jr., Washington Du Lyon,
Donald G. McAdee, Charles M. Mangum, Thurston P. Mangum, Johnny E. Marshall, Samuel E. Maddox, Jefferson W. Maltsby, Frank D. May, Claiborne Ross Maynard, Kenneth D. McDougall, William W. McGee.
Louis N. McGranahan, James A. McIver, Harry P. McKinney, Samuel Morton McNutt, John B. Mexner, Otho Merritt, Clarence H. Mills Jr., James Carlton Mims, John R. Minton, Ralph K. Mitchell,
Allison Meade Monroe, James E. Moore, Ben Munford, Edward J. Murray, Herman F. Myers, Charles F. Nelson, R. O. Nichols, Aubrey W. North, James L. O'Brien, John O'Brien,
Thomas J. O'Brien Jr., Shirley L. Owen, Felton Page, George Adams Page, Howard Schuler Page, Walter E. Page, Hollis Parker, Miles T. Parker, George E. Parrish, James C. Parton,
George H. Payton, W. A. Pierce, Marvin Pearson, Calvin W. Peed, Garland Orland Peel Jr., Bruce Penny, Arthur J. Pettiford, Howard Brinkley Pickett, Aubrey O. Pickford, Paul C. Pittman,
Ernest C. Porter, Bunny R. Puryear, Brooks C. Quattlebaum, Teddy Raspberry, Lenore W. Ray, Edward J. Reeves, David B. Reed, W. N. Reed Jr., Walter B. Wren, John Wallace Rose,
Archie L. Rich, Chalmer Alexander Richardson, James E. Riggin, John Rigsby, Leo Rigsby, Coy N. Riley Jr., Lucius Riley, Foy Roberson Jr., J.B. Roberson, Earl Reed Roberts,
Benjamin Winston Rogers Jr., Ernest T. Rogers, Ronnie Rowland, Alcee E. Ross, John Salamone, W. A. Sally, Thomas K. Shackner, Donald Schickner, Henry Seaman, Paul L. Sharp,
John Marion Sharp, Clifton A. Sheeran, Hokut D. Sharon, Madison R. Skeen, William T. Slade, Alan Taylor Smith, James Charles Smith, James D. Smith, Roland H. Smith, Matthew B. Smithwick,
W. D. Somerville Jr., Julian C. Spain, Logan M. Sparks, William Ross Spencer, William W. Stout Jr., James Henry Stowe, Madison W. Stutz, R. L. Taylor, Alton M. Teasley, James L. Terry,
William L. Thomas, Eli B. Thompson Jr., Hilton Davis Thompson, Willie Lee Thompson, Winston B. Tillotson, Arthur B. Turner, Richard C. Tyson, Hubert L. Veazey, Clarence Wall, Deming M. Ward,
Arthur F. Watson, Claiborne Watson, James B. Weaver, Edmund Lawrence Willard, Carl D. Whitfield, Edwin L. Whitefield, William C. Whitley Jr., Samuel L. Whitlow, Henry Hartzell Wickerson, William H. Willett,
Grady D. Williams, Lovelace Williams, J.C. Wilson Jr., Lloyd Wren, Oscar Lee Wren. The Korean War period lasted from June 27, 1950 through January 31st, 1955. Of the 5,720,000 Americans who served, 54,246 were killed, while 103,284 were wounded. There are 22 casualties from Durham County. John P. Barbie, Jerome G. Berry Jr., Vernon L. Brown, Willie L. Carver, Leon E. Clevenger,
Henry Lee Davis, Early Day, Hugh J. Drennan, David Gooch, Jeffrey W. Harrell, Howard Hoskins, Thomas A. Hunt, William J. Jones, Theodore R. Joyner, Homer G. King,
Leroy F. King, Leroy McLean, Kendrick A. McFadden, Eric Franklin O'Brien, George E. O'Neill, Vincent Ross Rickman, Wayne Roberson, Leo Walker. The Vietnam War lasted from August 5th, 1964 through May 7th, 1975. 8,744,000 Americans served. 90,220 Americans were killed, while 153,303 were wounded. There are 42 casualties from Durham County. Willie Edward Alston, David Harum Bass,
William Edward Boone, John Marshall Brown III, Leroy J. Browning, Freddie Lee Burnett, Wayne R. Barrage, Kirvin Clayton, Harold Eugene Couch, Joseph John Daffer, Kenneth James Dantzler, Dewey Maynard Eubanks,
James Edward Farrar Jr., Walter Henry Fennell, Randy Jack Glenn, John Milton Harrington, Harold Lee Harris, Edward Jackson Jr., William Miller Jr., James Minnick Moore, Roy Thomas Moss, Hugh Revis Nelson Jr.,
MacArthur Nichols, Thomas B. Orr Jr., James Lester Parker, Kenneth Edward Pennington, Harmon Wayne Perry, Julius Donald Pritchett, James Augusta Richardson, Richard Lee Sarvis, Franklin Graham Scoggins, Charles Earl Smith,
Douglas Bain Smith, Don Richard Sykes, Roosevelt Tharrington Jr., Alfred L. Thompson, James Douglas Traylor, William Hardy Upchurch Jr., William B. Watson Jr., Edward W. Williams Jr., Goler Jr. Williams, Johnny Williams. Our final two casualties are from Operation Iraqi Freedom. Brian E. Anderson, Prince K. Tiwia. Now Lindsay will lead us in the playing of taps.
Please stand if you are able. Thank you.
Thank you again for participating in Durham County Veteran Services 2020 Memorial Day program. Should you wish to visit the war monuments on Memorial Day, we invite you to come between 10 and 11 a.m. when staff will be hosting a table with flags and takeaway information on the 2020 census and veterans benefits. While observing appropriate social distancing guidelines, members of the community will be invited either to pick up a flag from the table and place it in the grounds on the side of the monuments in remembrance of their loved ones, or simply to take a flag home with them in remembrance of those who gave all in defense of the nation. Thank you again for joining us, and enjoy your holiday.